Hatred got a rifle. Aimed at the heart of this land. Hatred in our hearts. Blood stains on our hands. Red, white, and blues. There's murder on Orange Avenue. Red, white, and blue. There's murder on Orange Avenue. So much hatred, violence in this land. Ooh, I don't know what I'm gonna do. Don't know what I'm gonna do.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to the Black America Forum 2020, here live at the Des Moines Arts Center's Black Stories exhibit. I'm your producer, MarKaus.
And I'm Sabrina Ahmed with Local 5 News.
I created this forum with the premise of trying to continue a movement and unify Black votes in a time where change is needed, movement is needed, and momentum is needed.
We're not here to tell you who to vote for. We are simply here to ask the tough questions that haven't been asked before.
The questions that matter to us, to our people, are vast and plague us at a disproportionate rate. So we ask candidates about economics, domestic violence, and a number of other issues to get to the bottom of some of it.
But you're not going to hear from every candidate today. We reached out to every candidate who wants to represent Iowans on a federal level. The people who you'll hear from tonight are the ones who decided to answer those tough questions.
We are grateful you're here with us today. This is not about politics. This is about the issues that affect our community. So we've gathered up people that are leaders, influencers, the whole nine, to come represent us and talk about our issues directly to you.
You'll also notice that we are in the middle of this vast and beautiful Black Stories project. It is much more than an art exhibit, though. So you'll hear from the people who've curated this project about why they've decided to do this, and you'll learn that it is years in the making.
You'll hear from the innovator, the curator, and get an in-depth look of all the art throughout the show.
So buckle up, everybody. We have an incredible 2 hours planned for you.
All right, thank you for watching and tuning in. I am MarKaus. I'm sitting here now with a panel of community leaders. I have Al Womble, Courageous Fire, and Justin Lewis. So let's just dive right into it. This is election season. Voting is the most important thing. We are here today as African Americans, as Black people, to address the things that are most impactful to us. What are you all, as Black people, leaders in our community, looking for from a candidate running for office? And I'm gonna just pass it down and just answer that for us.
So for me, it would be addressing the disparities in our criminal justice system. Black people are incarcerated at 10.1 times the percentage that white people are. We're given 3 times as long of jail sentences, and people have failed to take into account how that disrupts the family and an individual from being able to re-enter society. I'm looking for people to address economic disparities, not only at the fact that, you know, Black unemployment is at 13.5% while white is only at 5.8%, but the fact that community block grants that are meant to help go and address the disparities that are involved with businesses in underprivileged communities often don't go there. And then the last would be the disparities in education. When we look at the way that white schools are funded as opposed to Black schools, it is absolutely shameful. And then for us to then have bad words for our young Black people who are out there trying to make a way in this world, and we're not properly funding their schools to give them a good education, that's absolutely disgusting to me. So criminal justice reform, economics, and education.
Well, for me, because I work in the field of domestic violence and specifically with our Black women, because it is the #1 health issue that Black women face, I'm looking for someone to really take a look at that seriously. I am very concerned about the fact that it does not get the attention that it deserves. And I understand that whatever candidate is going to make mistakes. So I'm not looking for someone who's perfect, but I am looking for someone who's authentically sincere, and I am looking for someone who's willing to learn from their mistakes and hear from the community.
So I think right now what is really on my heart is definitely a person that has character, decency. We tell our children all the time that character counts and character matters. So more than ever, I'm voting based off of that, somebody that is going to be an example going forward. And then my next thing is, as a Black male, I want to be understood and understand it. I don't want people to have to fear me when I'm in public spaces. So I want a leader who's going to be able to talk about unconscious bias, that is actually going to speak to about the history of racism that has taken place in America. And then also, you know, teach our history in its fullness. I don't want just a month where we're talking about MLK and just some of the easy digestible things that he said. I want it all to be laid out. I think our country's at a pivotal place where I think we either have to address these issues head on, or we, sadly, with a lot of the rhetoric, we're leading into sadly a divide of our country versus good versus evil, black versus white. Like, that's where we're heading, and I truly believe that we can address this by understanding one another. So getting into these courses that are teaching about implicit bias and how the media has given us a skewed view of one another, you know, and really focus on that. Somebody that's going to unite us through understanding. So.
Oh. All right, thank you for that. You've heard from 3 different people. We're going to keep talking to people all night. We're going to continue these conversations. I want you all to continue listening. Thank you for watching. This is the Black America Forum 2020.
Project came from the director of the Des Moines Arts Center, Jeff Fleming. But as a white man, he decided to bring 2 black Des Moines artists into the fold to help him curate the exhibit. The fact that this is happening in the midst of a civil rights movement is not lost on him. MarKaus chatted with him this week.
Jeff Fleming, thank you so much for joining us today. We stand here in the Black Stories exhibit that you all have been planning for over a year now. Incredible, it's diverse. Tell me what went into planning this incredible exhibit.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here and for asking those questions. This actually was the idea for the exhibition, and the project was a germ of an idea in early 2019. The Des Moines Arts Center has a marvelous collection by black artists, whether they're Black American, Black British, or African artists, and the idea was to share that with the community and invite the community in to experience the work and to respond and to engage the work. But there's also a fundamental difference with this project. Most museums, at least in the past, have been outward facing. In other words, we're the experts, we're sharing this information with you. This project is very different because it invites the community to come in and to share their ideas, their visions, their experience, and their reflections. So this is an invitation to come in, which is a fundamental difference by how museums, particularly contemporary art museums, have existed and operated in the past. So we're very pleased that that's an opportunity to invite the community to tell us. So in keeping with that theme, I met with individuals in the community leaders early on, usually one-on-one, sharing that idea, and the response was really positive. And so I invited 2 artists to call the Metro their home, Jordan Weber and Mitchell Squire, to curate the exhibition. So they would be the artists or the individuals that selected the work that you see here today. And the community individuals that I met with formed an advisory committee that we also, how do we do this? What is the appropriate way? How do we invite participation? Which has been an extraordinary experience. And what you see here is the result of that activity. So the exhibition is just one part of the story. The other part, Black Stories, is we invite the community to tell us and to share with us their experience and reflections, their stories, their responses to the work. We're gathering those stories, and we'll publish it in a book when the show is over. Wow. So it is a documentation of the community, not just the Arts Center.
Wow. Jeff Fleming, thank you so much for joining us today. That was incredible. We'll be right back with the Black America Forum.
Thank you so much.
All right, here we go. Hold on, wait a minute.
You just heard from Cindy Axney, Congresswoman for Iowa's congressional 3rd seat. Now, we also had a chance to talk to her opponent, who was familiar with this seat because he once held it. We asked him some of the same questions, and I want you all to pay attention now as he gives some of his solutions to those questions. Check it out.
We are here now with former Congressman David Young, who is now running for the seat, again, that he used to hold. Thank you so much for being here.
It's
we
my
really
pleasure.
appreciate your time.
Yep.
We are very close to the election, so I can only imagine how busy you are. We're here, of course, for the Black America Forum, and I want to get started by talking about some of the general policies that you think need to be put into action on a federal level, but specifically I'd like for you to maybe touch on how things have changed. Maybe your perspective has changed from when you did hold office.
Yeah, well, it's a pleasure to be here, and no important topic, but how do we all survive in this world and this chaos that we're experiencing, especially in 2020, and come together and see each other as who each other are. And so I believe the good Lord made us for relationship, and he wants us to have relationships with one another. And we all want the same thing. We want to be loved. We want an equal playing field. We want justice. We want to be respected. And to do that and to understand each other, you got to show up. So I'm showing up more in areas of the district that I hadn't shown up as much before. You know, even today, having an interview and sitting down with some black pastors. And so I'm a pasty white kid from Van Meter, right? I don't know the perspective of someone living in the inner city who's black or of another color. And so the conversations they say are uncomfortable and tough. They can be. They can also be very rewarding and comforting. And so getting back into office, you want to make sure that you have a lens of justice through everything, and making sure that does this impact any certain group or community in an unfair way? And if so, how do you change it? You know, is looking at those policies and then challenging others in the institutions around us, whether it's media, art, education, business, nonprofits, looking through that lens as well.
Thank you. You know, and I wanted to also just thank you personally for coming through and participating in this. You were actually the first candidate that we booked for this forum, so I wanted to just give you a slow clap for that. But
thanks.
On the subject of economics, while in Congress, was there anything specifically that you did in Congress to support a black economy? And if not, or if so, what do you feel like needs to be done more to support a black economy?
Good question. And first and foremost, for everybody who is out there working or is working, or any entrepreneur or small business person, regardless of the color of their skin, I want you to have more money in your pocket and be able to understand the economic climate out there to invest and grow and hire. I don't want the government to get in your way. Along with that kind of tax philosophy that I have, we had an opportunity, no pun intended, but I guess I'll just go forward with that, with opportunity zones. Senator from South Carolina, Tim Scott, brought this to Congress's attention about some of the more impoverished communities across the country. And sometimes that's communities of color as well, of non-color. I mean, there are poor white people, poor black people, poor brown people across the board, wherever they are. Those opportunity zones, bring them to life where there's investment, and making sure, though, that while that investment comes in, that those who have been impacted there and living there aren't kind of chased out because maybe their rent starts to go up. But make sure that they have the tools that they need and the roots that they need to stay in that community and be a part of it when these opportunities come along, and they're not displaced somewhere else, because that's the last thing you want, that segregated displacement.
Let's talk about police reform. Of course, that is something that has been a hot button issue in the year of 2020, but it's something that has needed to be addressed for a long time. What police reform do you believe is necessary? And on a federal level, what specifically can be done?
Yeah, so you want to be very careful here, because the last thing I think people want to do is put all the power on policing at the federal level, although I think there should be some things that should be done at the federal level. But you want your policing and those relationships to be made at the local level between communities. Last thing you want to do is call 911 and have it go to some dispatch center in Washington, D.C., right? But We're dealing with the here and the now, and so I was glad to see that there were some things that were done at our legislature here in Iowa, where it should start. And so, you know, you talk about things about qualified immunity. What does that mean? I want to make sure that police officers are obeying the law. At the same time, there are some protections there if they take a risk to do the right thing to try to save a life. At the same time, not use that qualified immunity as a shield to do something that they shouldn't be doing, and hide under that. If there are bad cops out there, and there are some bad cops out there, and those who can tell you about them the most are the good police officers and good law enforcement, and they want them out. Getting them out of law enforcement, I don't want them to be able to go move somewhere else and slip into another law enforcement role where they're not serving their communities. And so making sure that maybe there's a national database and looking at something, doing something like that so they can't get right back into where they had come from. And so those are two things I think that we can explore together across and get over the finish line as well, across party lines. And I hope to be a part of that process and part of that solution.
On the topic of incarceration, you know, it's one of the major things plaguing our community today. 13% of the population is black men, but we make up about 40% of the prison population. What, if elected, are ways that you would look to alleviate that?
Well, first of all, sit down with the impacted community members, the family members of those who are incarcerated, and talk to those who are. I'm very proud that just a few years ago, we passed something in Congress called the First Step Act, which had to deal with sentencing disparities. Yep. And if you looked at it and backed up and it clarified, it became more clear, the clarity there, it looked pretty racial. And that's the last thing you want. And so it took too long to correct that. And so that's why we need to bring that lens forward in a more timelier manner to look everywhere and see, is this still happening and what can be done about it?
Do you believe it's still happening?
I don't know. That's why I want to have those conversations, but I'm not going to doubt your statistics and the stories that are out there. Okay. And so I'm not going to deny that there's certainly been injustices in our country. You know, we're not a perfect union because we're not a perfect people, but we strive for it. And when we recognize that there are issues and problems, at great cost sometimes do we make. The Civil War, I mean, we went to war with ourselves. Came at a big cost, but you don't stop there. Civil Rights Act, First Step Act, let's keep going.
There's been a lot of discussion about the legalization of marijuana, or the at least decriminalization of marijuana, in order to reduce the incarceration rate in our country. Do you believe any or all of that should be done?
Well, I would hate to see someone's life ruined for a small amount of something that was harmless and that was only making them stupid, maybe. But I want those decisions to be made at the state level, and not at the federal level necessarily, because every state is different, and I believe in the local control. But to ruin someone's life for that, and it doesn't seem right to me. But I believe in things like medicinal marijuana, but not kind of at the federal level telling states what they need to do with their drug policy.
But do you support the the change of classification?
Yeah, changing from
from
Class
being a Schedule 1 narcotic.
Schedule 1A or 1 to something else, because marijuana and cocaine or crack are not the same, or heroin. Yeah.
On the subject of healthcare, obesity, COVID, a number of things, high blood pressure affect and afflict the black community. What ways would you look to change healthcare or change healthcare policies in general?
Well, I like a great focus on wellness, and we had a former senator, Tom Harkin, a Democrat from Cumming, Iowa, and he really focused on wellness, not just wellness of the body physically, but of the mind as well. And I don't think it gets enough attention. And right now with COVID-19 happening, we're talking about chasing therapies and chasing that vaccine, and we need to find it, right? It seems like nobody's talking about, well, how do you build up your immune system? With a good diet, with exercise, with the vitamins and nutrients that you need. And so I would like, when it comes to healthcare policy, making sure you're incentivizing good health. Sometimes you can do that with public-private partnerships. As you get healthier, maybe your healthcare costs can go down, or incentivizing companies or cooperatives to put a gym in the inside of your business, that kind of thing. But you know, we all want the same thing with healthcare. We want to bring the cost down. We want access to it. We want affordability, quality healthcare, taking care of people with pre-existing conditions. We all have family members, maybe even ourselves, who have issues. You know, I've lost 2 cousins to cancer. My Uncle Doyle has lost 2 legs from diabetes. And so this affects us all. And it's not a black or white issue, rich or poor, urban, rural, Republican or Democrat.
We're on the tail end of October. Like we were saying, I can't believe it's November. But October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and domestic violence is an issue that plagues the Black community at a higher rate than the general population. What do you believe needs to be done to help victims of domestic violence?
Well, make sure that they are able to tell their story in a safe way when they can get away and have the resources that they need. And you got to go to a deep place to come out of some of these circumstances where you can truly be vulnerable and leave some of these relationships. But if you don't, you may die. I mean, that happens. We read about it. And so, you know, at the federal level, where there are funds for domestic violence, Violence Against Women Act, get those down to the local level, to the states, to allow those who are using those grants to help shelter and counsel those who need it the most and find a safe place for those who are living in a horrible situation and who thought they'd never find themselves in that.
Thank you. So in 90 seconds, because we do this with everyone, so in 90 seconds, give your full why Black voters in Iowa should vote for you over your opponent.
Well, I didn't know I was going to come on here and start making the old campaign pitch, but and I'm uncomfortable in doing so in some ways because the issue that we're talking about is very, very serious. But I will tell you that, like I said before, being a pasty white guy from Van Meter and trying to understand lives that I'm not familiar with because I didn't grow up that way or in that community, but to listen to the people that I've talked to who walk through a 7-Eleven at the age of 18 and are followed around and cameras shift to them. I mean, I can't imagine. And trying to understand all these things and what it's like with certain living situations or maybe being trapped in a situation where they can't find the right health care or education for their children. So I'm somebody who's going to fight for everybody. I recognize the diversity in our skin color, in our shapes and sizes and sounds of our voices that God gave us, and He gave us these for a reason. But beneath all that and from within all that, we have hearts that cry out for the same thing, and that is justice and fairness and equity and equality and to be loved. And so when it comes to public policy, I want to make sure that there's no discrimination in public policy. And if there is, that we can build those efforts to get rid of it. And that we should be analyzing our institutions every day and looking in the mirror every day and saying, am I a better person than I was than yesterday? And so life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, fighting for a great quality of life for everybody, making sure that their voices are heard under the Constitution, where they can gather and assemble and demonstrate and have their voices heard, and making sure that they can do so, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, pursue that happiness where they can feel safe, where there is community policing that is integrated within the community, where there are good people just looking out for one another on both ends, and where we have a strong national defense where hopefully we never have to use it, where it's peace through strength, and people are intimidated by it, and that will bring more peace, not just worldwide, but then collectively to our lives here at home. And so I love people. The Lord gave me a servant's heart, and I just want to serve.
Thank you so much for being on here today, David. We'll be right back. Thank you for watching the Black America Forum.
Thank you.
J.D. Scholten is a Democrat running for Iowa's congressional 4th seat, which is currently held by Steve King. Steve King lost in his primary, so it's an open race.
Now, District 4 is even less diverse than the rest of Iowa. In one of its counties, of all of the residents, only 0.5% are Black. But Scholten says he wants to represent all of Iowa. Take a listen to our conversation.
and welcome to the Black America Forum 2020. I'm MarKaus. I'm here with my co-host, Sabrina Ahmed. And we have our special guest on right now, congressional candidate J.D. Scholten. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, I just want to thank you for being willing to take time and speak directly to the Black and youthful voters. It's something that we know is important, especially during this election season. So just a personal thank you. But let's kick it off with you being sort of a new unicorn in the political arena. I think there's an area where we'd like to kind of get to know you a little bit more. Just in general, can you break down some of your general policies that you would put in play to help the Black population in Iowa?
Well, I think a lot of this, I know we're here before an election, but this is something that we need to work all year round, every year, and engage in all communities. You know, one thing that we've really spotlighted with our campaign is lifting voices up and just like we see the demographics changing in my district and in my hometown as well. When I graduated high school, Sioux City East was 4% minority. It is currently now 24% Latino. And so, but having played sports, I was disproportionately around diversity far more than my fellow classmates. And so what some of the things that we're pushing for, whether it's criminal justice reform, housing and making sure that there's affordable housing, healthcare. My goal is universal healthcare. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you're white, Black, or brown, you should have an opportunity to succeed. And that's what our campaign's about, is really leveling that playing field.
Okay.
You mentioned succeeding, and obviously one of the first things that people need to have in order to succeed is to have comfort to buy the things that they want to buy, to put food on the table for their families. You mentioned housing, but to even afford renting, let alone owning. So what can you specifically do on a federal level to help the Black economy?
Yeah, well, I think initially raising the minimum wage is a great way to go. Supporting union and collective bargaining rights, passing Paycheck Fairness Act to address wage discrimination. These are all things that I feel that need to get passed to level the playing field, and a huge part of this. And again, it is about making sure that that American dream is for everybody. It doesn't matter zip code, doesn't matter education or anything like that. It especially here in Iowa.
Okay. On that same subject of reform, I want to kind of shift over to police reform. Do you believe that there's a need for police reform in this country? And if so, what do you think can be done on the federal level to make some of these changes happen?
You know, I really liked what happened down in Des Moines and how quickly that happened after some of the things this summer. And I do believe that there is reform. I believe that there is an overwhelming burden on police to go in areas such as whether it's poverty, mental illness, or addiction issues like that. I feel that really takes away from and adds strain to that. I believe we do need a national use of force standard so it's consistent throughout the whole nation. And those are some of the things I would like to see federally.
How do you get communities on board with that national standard? That is something that many local communities have pushed back against, because in general, these police entities want to control how they operate.
Well, I think one of the things that I've noticed, we just finished our 374 town tour, going to every single town in this district, and it's bringing people to the table. And that is, I think we need to have more and more discussions. And I've talked with several different police chiefs in this district and several different sheriffs and members of like different activists all throughout the district as well. And so this is something that we need to continue that dialogue and just work together on this. I feel so often there are these things that get passed that people don't really have the opportunity to have their voice be heard. And I feel that's really hurting our democracy.
JD, thank you for that. Let me, while we're kind of on that same subject, let's look at incarceration. You know, 13% of the United States population are Black men, but we make up 40% of the incarceration rate. What federal policies do you think, or would you work towards putting in place that could help alleviate that?
Well, I think we should end mass incarceration. I think we should have reform when it comes to cash bail. I think private prisons are completely wrong. I feel they're immoral as well. And one of the things that we were blessed here in the Northern District of Iowa for federal judges, we had Judge Bennett for the last 18 years, 19 years. He's now down in Drake, but he's been a leader in the nation in ending mandatory minimums and preaching about that. And that needs to get done because we see a lot of people who have addiction issues ended up in jail for 20 years. I think the other thing we should strongly focus on is legalizing marijuana and going down that direction as well.
So what's the first step in legalizing marijuana? Is that to make it a not have it be a Schedule I narcotic? And if so, how do you do that? And do you think it's up to the states? Sorry, that's kind of a three-part question there. Do you think it's up to the states to legalize it recreationally?
I do. I think what you laid it out there was perfect. We deschedule it and then we leave it up to the states. You know, I lived in the state of Washington when they passed it, and one of the biggest things we saw was a huge tax income for a lot of different purposes and needs of the state. And I feel like there's been a lot of just a lot of things that where people would get in trouble, they aren't getting in trouble anymore, and there's just been a effort in that industry to really go back on some of these criminal records and help some of those folks as well.
JD, how do you foresee, kind of back to the one of your first points that you made, is that there needs to be a change in healthcare policy. There is a disproportionate impact of COVID on the Black population, of obesity, of high blood pressure, of so many different issues that face the Black population as far as health is concerned. So how can you better their health and also improve their health care?
You know, one thing that I've seen throughout, whether it's Black communities or even in rural communities as well, is the lack of quality grocery stores. And this is something we talk about every single day. And this is something that I'm extremely passionate about, is building that coalition, what I like to call the Dollar General Coalition. You know, I see in certain urban areas where Dollar General tends to be the only grocery store, and that's not a grocery store. They don't sell fresh produce. They don't sell fresh meat. I would love to build that rural urban connection and offering higher quality foods and going down that direction. I think that would be a huge win-win. And for Iowa, we could be a leader in this. You know, we're the second most agriculture producing district in America, the 4th district of Iowa. And this is something that we just, I see the want is there, the need is there, but the infrastructure is not there. And so that's something that I would like to create is, and this is not going to change conventional agriculture. Let me be clear with that. But this is for pennies on the dollar. We can invest in regional food hubs and creating that urban-rural connection when it comes to quality food.
And JD, that's a great point. And just as a distiller, I can just soft subject. That's exactly what we need. So that on subject though, let me ask you. You know, we're on the tail end of October with this being Domestic Violence Awareness Month. One of the biggest issues that are facing the Black and brown community, and it's something that's pressing every day, is the protection of Black women and the lack of resources there are for domestic violence victims. What can we look forward to from you, if elected, to address some of those things as well?
Well, from a federal standpoint, it'd be to support the Violence Against Women's Act. I think that'd be the first step. But this is something near and dear to my heart. My mother volunteered at different battered women shelters when I was younger. And so we just, I think as a nation, make more awareness of this. And I think one way we can do that is by passing that act.
Can you just give us your kind of
90-second stump speech to specifically Black Americans. Why should Black Iowans vote for you over Randy Feenstra?
Yeah. Well, you know, our campaign stems from getting out there to the people and listening. And that's what we did this summer when we saw civil unrest. And it's about living up to the morals and the values of this country. We like to think that we have all these great visions, and other countries look up to us when we talk about the American dream, when we talk about Lady Justice being blind. But the reality is that it is disproportionately not fair for a lot of people, and it's been that way since this country has started. And so what we need to do, and what I'm proud of, is the Iowa that I grew up in is not punching down, it's lifting each other up. And so that's where we talk every single day about fix, fight, and secure. And it's fix healthcare, fight for an economy that works for everyone, and secure our democracy by cleaning up the special interests that dictate it. We in every facet of those things, whether it's healthcare, we see disparities between economic, and we see healthcare disparities, we see economic disparities, and they disproportionately affect people of brown and black in Iowa. And this is, I want to put the biggest spotlight on this, is what we saw here in Sioux City, when we have consumers paying the most they ever have for meat, when workers, often people of color, are getting the same wages as when my family moved here in 1984, and then we're also squeezing out the farmers. We're all in this together. If you're a consumer, a worker, or a farmer, we are all in this together, and it's about lifting each other up.
All right, JD, thank you so much for joining us today on this is our first annual inaugural thing, and I just want to thank you so much for joining in on us. Having this platform as be able to talk to Black voters, and I just want to personally thank you. You're one of the few that, not one of the few, but one of the ones that was brave enough to come through and talk to us. So thank you for that. I want everyone to stay tuned for the Black America Forum 2020. I'm your host alongside Sabrina Ahmed, and we'll be right back.
And we are here now with Congresswoman Cindy Axne, who represents Congressional District 3. Congresswoman Axne, we are what, like a day and a half away from Election Day? If that, thank you so much for being here. We know how busy you are.
I'm so grateful to be here. Well, what a great opportunity with two incredible people, such an artist here as well, and the environment that we're in. This is amazing.
It's kind of fun to walk in and say, oh, we're here not only right before the election in this gorgeous room, but here talking about Black stories in the Black Stories Project, right?
Very cool.
So I would like to get started by just talking in general. As you've been in Congress for 2 years now, what policies have you been working on to better Black Americans, Black Iowans?
I think there's a lot of things that we can talk about. Let me just start with what's on everybody's mind right now, which is social justice and making sure that we're protecting every person in this country, no matter what color they are, and that our police are protecting our communities and are taking the right parameters to fix what is really hurting our country at this point. So I was really proud to be one of the early signers for the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act that we passed out of the House now. My goodness, I want to say 2 to 3 months ago at this point. You know, to address obviously some of the most important aspects that we've seen in policing, making sure that the use of force is not deadly by taking away, banning things like chokeholds and other carotid and other types of holds or things that could hurt people, number one. Number two, making sure that we get rid of racial profiling and that we train officers in a way that allows them to understand what actually is happening, possibly that they might not be that aware of when it comes to racial profiling, but they are. Certainly making sure that we don't transfer bad actor officers from one location to another. And then if you can believe it, still in today's day, part of this act is that we have put an end to lynching. Lynching is still not illegal in this country, and so this is actually a part of the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. But we've worked on multiple other bills to address mental health with our police officers and dealing with mental health behavior with folks in our communities. We've addressed multiple other aspects of policing prior to this. But in addition to this, we passed the act to make sure that the Equal Voting Rights Act, obviously for John Lewis, we renamed it in his honor. We passed it just after he passed away. So I was really proud to be a part of that moment. But I would say some of the most important things as well that we've addressed aren't being talked about as much as they should be right now. Those inequities that have persisted in our country for far too long, whether it's access to housing, access to capital for starting up a business, the way we structure our schools, I think we need to look at that. It's not right the way that we are funding our schools right now, leaving some kids dependent on their zip codes behind while others have greater opportunity. Healthcare, we have higher comorbidity rates with our black community right now because of COVID, because of the lack of access to good healthcare. So we've been working on all those bills, raising the minimum wage. Too many black folks are in jobs where they're on the front line, working in retail, working in nursing homes, things like that, and they don't get paid appropriately. So I would say that in addition to the things that we're addressing, just that might be in people's forefront right now because of the injustice that we're dealing with, we can't forget about those root causes, and those are also things we've been working on for my entire term.
Congresswoman Axney, one of the focuses with the content that we create here has always been economics. Looking at the black economy, what steps have you taken since being in office to support the black economy, and what other steps would you take, or what more should be done?
We have a lot that needs to be done. It's so unfortunate that that whites are, have a 10 times higher median income rate across this country. There's no reason that we should have this much disparity, and this is very unfair. And it doesn't. First and foremost, it doesn't just hurt black families and black communities. It hurts our entire community and our entire country. And folks need to understand we're all in this together. First, we're raising the minimum wage. We have got to make sure that people have a living wage, that they can afford a decent place to rent, that they can put food on the table, that they're not wondering if they're going to be able to make ends meet. That's first and foremost. Secondly, we're looking to open up and expanding opportunities for every kid to have a post-secondary education. So that's expanding things like trade schools and apprenticeship programs and two-year colleges as well as four, but then allowing kids to have a pipeline from K through 12 to those schools and then to a job. And we know that we've got to focus on our black and brown communities in particular who have less opportunity. And certainly folks who are just from a lower socioeconomic status. I would also say one of the bills that I'm really proud of is my human capital bill that I wrote in financial services. And my good friend Ayanna Presley is helped me write some pieces to reflect diversity initiatives greater within our businesses. My background is in leadership development and strategy, and so I know that when businesses say that, oh, their people are their most important asset, but we're not requiring businesses to report on that. They only report on their hard goods, so to speak. Well, if those are your most important assets, and we're seeing right now during COVID that if you do not support your employees, if you don't have the right benefits, we're leaving people out on the streets. And so my bill actually asks them to disclose information around, how many minority people they're hiring, opportunity for moving up and getting promotions, the types of benefits and pay and disparities within all of that. And I worked with my friend Ayanna to make sure that we address the diversity issues within the workplace as part of that bill. So it's kind of in a lot of things is what we're trying to do.
You mentioned police reform, of course, that you've been working on in Congress, but kind of in addition to police reform, I'd like to talk about the incarceration rate. 13% of the U.S. population is black men, but they make up 40% of those who are incarcerated on federal level. The disparity exists on a state level here in Iowa as well. What policies specifically do you think can exist that would decrease that disparity of the incarceration rate?
Yeah, well, first of all, we need to decriminalize marijuana or legalize marijuana, number one. Number two, we need to make sure that we don't have racial profiling within our police around the country, and we need to make that a law. That's part of the law that we put into place. And we need to make sure that I think, one of the most important things that we can do is we need to start engaging with our black communities and making sure that some of those young people are coming up and becoming police officers, working in mental health, working in all of the areas where we're seeing way too much a disparity in arresting young black men and women. And so, we've got a lot to do in addressing how we get folks into the system of being a part of the solution. And right now, that's not happening. We don't have enough representation within our police forces, and we've got to make sure that that happens.
Looking at healthcare, especially in the midst of a pandemic, we have COVID, obesity, diabetes, a number of things that disproportionately affect the black community. How do you change healthcare? How do you help address these access issues and everything that comes with that?
Yeah, well, I have said since the beginning of my first primary, I want to shore up the Affordable Care Act, keep the provisions within it that protect people with pre-existing conditions, obviously lower the cost of prescription drugs, keep kids on parents' plans until they're 26, but I want to open up a public option so anybody can buy into Medicare or Medicaid. I don't believe that insurance, health care should be tied to a job. I believe that everybody should have affordable quality health care, and that means we've got to make sure everybody has it, and that is what I consider a public option to help us with. And the other thing that we need to do is make sure that we've got good providers in every corner of this country, in deep urban areas, in rural areas, where we tend to have folks who don't have as much economic viability, and there's a disparity there. One of the earliest conversations I had was with Dr. Yogi Shah, who's head of Broadlawns Hospital, and we talked about the socioeconomic issues related to people's health care. The fact that we have people in our own community that because they live a zip code over, the lifespan difference could be 10 years is absolutely unacceptable. We need clean food in people's backyards. We have places of this in our city right here where we don't have grocery stores where people can go and get fresh fruit and vegetables, where they can't get access to the protein and things that they need. All of these things need to be addressed. And so for me, healthcare is not just about making sure that we've got providers there and that everybody has coverage. It also means thinking about how our kids are growing. We need to make sure that, and one of the bills that I wrote extends coverage for women and their babies in their first year, because right now that goes away, and a lot of times women aren't bringing children, that's under Medicare and Medicaid, so those women aren't bringing their children in when they need to in a safe manner. So we've got to address health care from the beginning. That means good food, that means good schools, that means good housing, and making sure that you live in a safe community with a roof over your head, with good heat, good air conditioning, and comfort that you need. All of that ties into being a healthy person. And, we need to make sure that we've got jobs in people's neighborhoods. There's so much that needs to be done. I'm excited about hopefully having a second term just so we can work on these issues. We've been having to hold up we've been having to hold things together for the last couple of years. Now it's a great time for us to be able to bring opportunity to people and move forward.
We have two topics left that we would like to get to, and we have about 2 minutes left. I hate to say that. So what I would like for us to do is kind of get through the next two topics in like a minute each, if that's okay. I know.
Come on, Sabrina.
I'm sorry. We are on the tail end of October, of course, and we're officially now in November, but at the end of Domestic Violence Awareness Month, which is October. So I'd like to just briefly discuss domestic violence and how that is another issue that disproportionately impacts the black population. What can be done?
Well, one of the things that we can do is what I did for the Violence Against Women Act, and I raised the resource amount that goes out to nonprofits and places like, advocacy offices that deal with domestic violence. So I increased it by $50 million to make sure that we had access across this country for everybody. But right now during COVID, we've put pieces in place in the laws that we've passed out of the House to increase funding and resources to address domestic violence and many of the other issues that we've talked about. about. That bill's languishing right now in the Senate, not doing anybody any good.
This is my favorite part of the interview. In 90 seconds, just tell black voters, or 60 seconds, actually, yeah. Sabrina keeping me online. In 60 seconds, tell us why black voters in Iowa should vote for you.
First and foremost, we need to send people out to Washington who are going to stand up for what's right. And I realized very early on that when you come from Iowa, you've got to be the voice of 10 representatives. So what they're going to get from me is somebody who never backs down and who's a fighter and who is relentless for taking care of the issues that we're facing here in Iowa. And that means our black communities. I don't care what color you are, what religion you are, what sexual orientation you are, what zip code you come from. Every single person in the community that I represent deserves to have a voice in Washington. So I'm standing up strong to make sure that those voices are heard. We need to protect the Democratic House majority. We have put a policy in place that we are requiring ourselves to look at diversity in every piece of policy that we write. We know how important it is to address this issue, and we need to make sure that we're continuing to hold the opportunity to pass these laws that will protect people in our black communities. And I will tell you, I will make sure that I work with our community leaders and kids and young people who need the support to make sure that we address the issues in policing, that from a federal level to a state level to a local level, we're implementing those policies. Now that we have some written at the federal and state level, we need to make sure that on the ground those are being put into practice. And finally, I would say, I want to make sure that every kid, every black child has an opportunity. This starts when you're born. It starts by being able to get a good education, and it starts by having an opportunity for a post-secondary education. It also means you get to be able to buy a home, and you get to be able to afford your health insurance. Those are all the things that I'm supporting. Those are root cause issues that we have to address, and I like nothing better than to solve problems, and that's where I'd like to fix those issues.
Congresswoman Axie, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, you're so dope. Thank you for that. I'm here with Sabrina, Ahmed. I want y'all to stay tuned. Thank you, Congressman, for coming on today. Super dope. Y'all stay tuned. This is the Black America Forum 2020.
Got on a pure paper route once I found that the rap game phony. My partner tried to put the pack game on me. Didn't take long to figure that ain't for me. It ain't a bad thing, Brody. I still love the game like Pops love Tony. See, it's with me, but it's not on me. These days, I'm the man at the kickback. 2-year-old in my hand, you can't get that. Her name is Rye. Type of niche to start a new vibration. I'm in the tuck now with a new libation. Cool, sometimes you gotta chill just to take a deep breath. I was toxic, using depression to de-stress. That's how I digress. Things I can't digest. Different beatings inside of my chest. Jewels, if you listen, moving with precision. Every single thing I do it for position. They pop pills, kill kids, do bids for position. But if you on that front line, hold down your position. If you bout it, then be about it. Show her your position. For generational wealth, put yourself in position. Your own detriment, you don't listen. You could end up working for the game like Jimmy Henchman. You could be a boss and have plenty henchmen, dodging the nonsense while you penny pinching. A plenty pension created by you, a luxury only enjoyed by few. I can see it without a bird's eye view. Jewels, if you listen, move with precision. Every single thing you do it for position. My daddy worked his hands to the bone so I could have position. Mama never let up on me, now I'm in position. It would take an act of God to remove me from position. It would take an act of God to remove me from position.
We are here now with Luana, Teresa, and Shatai, 3 ladies who are here and to participate in what community leaders think about what's happening in this world right now. And My heavens, it's a lot. So I want to, right now, just start by talking about the presidential race, because that's what's on a lot of people's minds. Right. So let's start, just Teresa, tell me what you're looking for in a president.
I am looking for someone who cares deeply about the well-being of the people in this country, someone who cares about the children that are locked up at the border. I want someone who cares about my community, cares about the generations that will flow from me, cares about mental health, because that is the cornerstone of anything that we want to do, and generally has a moral compass.
Shatai, I'd love to hear from you as well. Tell me what you are looking for in candidates who represent our state.
Thank you. So one of the most important things to me is someone who has compassion, someone who is passionate about mental health, health care, police reform, and just overall, puts action towards the things that they are promising, the things that they are talking about now during the election time, not just to win over the votes, but to just truly put fuel to the fire, the things that they are talking about now.
And Luan, I want to hear from you. A lot of this conversation about what a president can do for us is, you have all these wonderful hopes and dreams for what a president can do, but a lot of that starts in a community, and that starts locally, and how we can impact each other. So what do you think, in the midst of all of these, all this animosity, needs to be done on a more local level?
Oh, I'm glad you asked me that. We're here in Des Moines, Iowa, and here in the state of Iowa, 1/3 of homicide victims are Black. And there is no state funding right now that goes toward victim services for homicide survivors. That's something that we can start with right away. Let's start looking at what is causing that problem, how can we prevent that problem, and let's put our money where our mouth is and start to fund services for survivors of homicide.
What kind of services do you think would be helpful?
There's a whole section of victim services in the state. Domestic violence, sexual assault, violent crime, and homicide. And what victim services does is that they work with the family individually. They take the time to do funeral planning. They take the time to get to know the family, understand the family. If they're doing their services right, they're embedded in the community. And so when something happens, when there's an altercation, they're called first. So we don't even necessarily need to look at police for that job, and we can allow them to do the detective work that they need to do while victim services are working with the family and the community. And I think that that's a good model really around the country where, as we're talking about state-sanctioned violence, that's something that could probably be used to alleviate a little bit of that when we're allowing investigators to do investigative work and not, peruse for other crimes that they know or don't know is even there. They can concentrate on that work and let victim service providers, mental health providers, social workers do the job in the community, if that makes sense.
And is that something you think needs to happen at a state level in the legislature? Does that need to be legislated, or is that something that happens in the city council?
No, this is state legislature, because right now there is a pot of money that goes for domestic violence and sexual assault for victim services. There is no state money for violent crime and homicide for victim services. And that money actually does come from the same pot of money that the police are funded through, as well as Department of Corrections. That's all the judiciary appropriation. So there needs to be money that's dedicated to that, specifically since 1/3 of homicide victims in Iowa are Black.
Now, Teresa, we just heard from Congresswoman Axne, and she was talking, and this is something I've heard a lot of people say needs to be changed in communities that are predominantly Black, but really they're low-income communities, and that is access to healthy food. Have you experienced that there is no access to healthy food? I mean, talk to me a little bit about your personal experiences with that.
I mean, I live in a 50314 area code. I don't have a problem accessing healthy food. I don't. But I do know that there are others in my community that do. When you go to the grocery store, and my grocery store, when I go in and I see that they've redone it, and we've got a whole row of slushy machines, and you've made the produce section smaller. If you want to give us all the sugar and less access to healthy food, that's a problem. That's a problem. We don't need brand new, slushy machines. We need fresh fruits and vegetables.
How does that problem get fixed? That's what I really think, because that isn't necessarily something that can be legislated on a federal level.
I think it can be.
Okay.
I think maybe we come together as a community and we demand better, but also whomever is putting the slushy machines in, I'd like you to consider if that would be okay in your neighborhood, because I've gone to other grocery stores and I don't necessarily see that.
Shatai, I'd love to hear from you. Talk to me a little bit about what you have seen on a community level that you think can be improved, that doesn't sound like something that big, but would really have a massive impact on the people around you.
Well, I think that we need to have more funding allocated towards community services, specifically mental health services. And that includes, maybe some Medicaid reform in the way that those services are getting reimbursed, access to services. And it doesn't have to be anything, mental health includes things on a smaller scale. That means people, being in the schools. That means people getting access to services in their community, whether that's therapy or BHIS or whatever that may be, as well as just access to health care, affordable health care, and things like that, that can, the foundation to our health.
And it does tie back to slushy machines as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. And food deserts as well, yeah.
That is going to stick with me. I do not want any slushy machines.
Well, and that kind of speaks to, the food desert. So there might be one grocery store in the area, and that one grocery store that everyone has access to, there's slushy machines instead of fresh produce.
We are. Hashtag no more slushy. Ladies, thank you so much for me. I really wish we had more time because I have a lot of questions, a lot of things to mull over. So I'm going to get your phone numbers, and we're going to do this again. Okay. Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. Stay with us, everyone. Democrat Abby Finkenauer represents District 1, that's Northeast Iowa. She says since her time in Congress, she has been working tirelessly to better the Black community. She's in a tight race with Republican Ashley Hinson. We reached out to Hinson, but she did not respond to our request for participation in this forum. Take a listen to our conversation with Abby Finkenauer. We are joined now via Zoom by Congresswoman Abby Finkenauer, who is running to represent and continue to represent Northeast Iowa. That is Congressional District 1. Congresswoman Finkenauer, thank you so much for being with us.
Happy to, and thank you so much, Sabrina and MarKaus, for hosting this and getting to have this great conversation today.
Now, many of the people who we've spoken to throughout the course of preparation for this forum have not been in office, but you, on the other hand, are currently holding office. So we'd like to begin by you just talking specifically about what policies you are working on to just improve the lives for the Black population, of course, across the country, but specifically here in Iowa.
Yeah, so we've been working on a broad range of topics right now in Congress. And to be honest with you, there are topics that, quite frankly, should have been dealt with a long time ago, that I am learning a lot right now, listening to folks within my community, but also in Congress as well. Leaders who have taken, extraordinary roles, whether it's Lauren Underwood of Illinois, who I've worked with on issues surrounding Black maternal health care, or whether it's Hakeem Jeffries, the chairman of our caucus,
when it comes to criminal justice and policing reform, and even just getting to learn from and had the honor of for close to a year and a half of getting to hear from the great late Congressman John Lewis. I remember one of the caucus calls with Congressman John Lewis after obviously the tragic murder of George Floyd, and hearing him talk to us folks who come from different backgrounds all across the country, and really, making sure that we acknowledge that yes, that there are conversations happening now across the country, but we're decades behind where we should be. And that really woke me up to the point where we started looking at different policies, not just criminal justice reform, not just police reform, which we've worked on, whether it's the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, but again, other inequities, whether it's in healthcare or whether it's in education, or whether it's, again, pay inequities and the economic side of things as well. And a big part of that, too, was just conversations I've had within the community where one woman, again, reminded me that it was more than police reform. And that's what we've been trying to work on ever since.
Abby, thank you for that. And thank you again for joining us today. You mentioned a bit about economics. What specifically have you done since you've been in Congress to improve the Black economy, and what more needs to be done?
Yeah, so I sit on the Small Business Committee, where I chair rural development, agriculture, trade, and entrepreneurship. And so very specifically in the entrepreneurship space, we have brought a lot of different voices to Washington, or even now through our Zooms that we're doing in front of my subcommittee, to hear some of the barriers to entry, essentially, for being able to start a small business. And one of the biggest ones is access to capital. And so we have actually targeted small business programs that are directed towards women, minority, veterans, making sure that those opportunities are available. And then also our small business development centers are there as resources to help folks get off the ground as well. And again, find that, whether it's, again, it's hard to find the capital if you don't have it, but offering the right types of grants, and then also offering the right types of loan programs as well to help new entrepreneurs get off their feet, when so many are, again, when you're talking about women, when you're talking about minorities, when you're talking about veterans, it's just really an unequal playing field when it comes to the traditional entrepreneur that you think about. And that's something that our country has needed to work on, and that we're excited to keep diving into. And it's more than that, right? When you're talking about being able to start a business and being able to build wealth, it's hard to do if you don't have the right child care. It's hard to do if you don't have the right retirement, right? How are you going to leave a company that you may have a retirement with and be able to start your own if we don't have better plans? So there's things like multi-employer pension plans, that type of stuff that we're working on as well. And then also equal pay. That's something I worked on in the State House in Iowa that I've continued to fight for in Congress. Obviously, Congress has a Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act, and we're happy to see that pass, but the truth is there needs to be more teeth in it. It's not right that Black women make 63 cents to the dollar of a white man, and it shouldn't be that way. And we have to do better. And so that's the type of stuff we'll continue to work on as well.
Now, you mentioned when we were originally just talking about policies in general, police reform as well. You said you worked on the George Floyd bill, but can you just dive a little bit more into specifically what you think should be done on a federal level for police reform while still allowing these communities to have community policing?
Yeah, so one of the things when I started looking at the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act that was put forward to our caucus, where we started to have input and discussions about what was within that, one of the pieces of it had to do with no chokeholds banned, or what's a chokeholds banned, and use of force policies. And I started then having conversations with our community leaders, our Black community leaders, our faith leaders, and then also police departments. And I had, it was a great conversation with Chief Fitzgerald, the new police chief in Waterloo. And hearing from him, and I asked him directly about the use of force policy when it comes to chokeholds, because this was not my area of expertise. And I wanted to make sure I was hearing from him as well. And he flat out told me that in the year 2020, there is absolutely no reason that chokehold should be on any use of force doctrine in the United States. And what that said to me, you know, because people have asked, is it the federal government's role? Is it the state's role? Is it local role to look at when it comes to, again, use of force? And what it hit me that when you have inequities in different police departments when it comes to those doctrines, and they are so different, that training so different, that becomes then a national problem when not every force has the right training or has the right use of force on their books. And so so there's that piece of it, but then there's also a piece, obviously, as well, of just independent investigators, that type of thing, also getting the right reporting. And that's something, again, we realize is that we're not necessarily getting the right numbers even from different places throughout the country. And so having a more level playing field on that as well, so we have accurate data of what's actually going on within our communities, and that we can pass the right federal legislation to actually address it and deal with it.
Congressman Finkenauer, thank you. On the subject of healthcare, you know, obesity, COVID-19, a number of ailments plague the Black community at a disproportionate rate than in comparison to the rest of the nation. What policies or things do you plan on changing in our healthcare system to help alleviate that?
Well, making sure that every single person in this country has access to good, affordable healthcare is number one. And not just that, being able to afford prescription drugs that keep you alive are also incredibly important, especially when it comes to diabetes and affording insulin. And that's something that I have really dived into over the last couple of years, because of the fact that it doesn't matter where you are in this country, it is affecting you. And disproportionately, again, the Black community when it comes to, again, diabetes and being able to get the right care, even for heart disease, you name it, to afford the medications that you need to be able to, again, stay alive. And, you know, when we passed HR 3 through the House last December, it was a bill that made Medicare negotiate directly with drug companies to bring the cost of these drugs down. And then that also then would apply to everyone else as well, even if you weren't on Medicare. And so this is one of the biggest things that we can possibly do. But then at the same time, we have, I mentioned this earlier, Black maternal health care is one of the things that I'm very passionate about, because of the fact that I have now learned so much from my colleague, Lauren Underwood. She has done incredible work educating us as her colleagues, and then also proposing great legislation, the Save Moms Acts of 2020. There's actually quite a few of them. We're co-sponsors of these bills as well, and they are studies that look into why we have inequities the way we have, whether it's in childcare, whether it's transportation issues, whether it's nutrition issues, you name it, and looking into that, and then also putting the right policies then together to go fix them.
Congresswoman Finkenauer, kind of on the same lines of taking care of women, we are on the tail end. October was a domestic violence awareness month, and there are serious issues of domestic violence, specifically in the Black community. So my question for you is, what do you believe? And of course, men are victims of domestic violence as well. But what do you think can be done to protect the Black population from domestic violence and to improve the communities?
Yeah, so on the federal level, we have passed and reauthorized through the House the Violence Against Women Act. Unfortunately, the Senate has not picked that up yet. And one of the pieces that we really fought for in the House, it seems to be one of the holdups in the Senate, has to do with closing the boyfriend loophole. And so making sure that it's not just married partners that would, when it comes to possessions of firearms, you name it, when they are making threats against women, it also is, again, boyfriends and that type of thing, right? Which, again, that has been one of the biggest issues we've heard as well when it comes to domestic violence, because when a woman is killed, it is typically by somebody that she knows. And so this is why that's been incredibly important for us. But then as well, we also need more funding when it comes to domestic violence awareness and programs, and also the right outreach into all communities, and making sure that folks are aware of the programs that are out there and that exist already. And then again, supporting and making sure we're plussing up the stuff that does work. I know, especially, I mean, even on our tribal lands, that's been an issue as well. We've been working on that too. We just plussed up and helped with a grant for the Meskwaki Nation, which is in my district, to make sure that they had more funding to further domestic violence programs. But then also, even in the Violence Against Women Act, we changed the way that if you are on tribal, or you don't have to be on tribal lands for somebody to go through a tribunal type of process if you are being looked into for abuse of a tribal woman. So anyway, there's a lot of different things that have needed to be addressed, and different loopholes we've needed to close, which we'll keep working on. And again, plussing up the funding of the programs we know that work.
Thank you. So Congresswoman Finkenauer, in America right now, Black men make up about 13% of the population, but 40% of the incarcerated population. And we know the disproportionate things that afflict specifically in Iowa. What things would you do in office if elected to change that?
Yeah, so some of the other things I've worked on, the First Steps Act is actually a piece of legislation that we've worked on in Congress, where it addresses mandatory minimums. It also addresses inequities in drug offenses in particular, which
specifically because racism amplifies injustices. It amplifies discrepancies, right? It amplifies those things. But COVID has shown us that the issue that I have in Waterloo on the east side is not much different regarding access to Wi-Fi or healthcare than an individual who lives in Rhinebeck or Dyke, New Hartford, right? So we have similarities there. That's where we can have collaboration. Now, understanding that racism in our system amplifies those things is what we have to continue to push against. But there are ways for us to build bridges that we have to identify and explore. But there's also ways for us to lead, and we do that by really being geared towards change, by not stopping, by really choosing to do something in these moments. If we do that, I think our future is much brighter than our today. But it doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen without hard work, and it definitely doesn't happen if we decide to stop. If we decide to stop the energy, the effort, and the movement that we have going on right now.
I had to stop and think for just a second because I think I agree with both. I also agree with Kenneth as far as I believe that black people in the community are overlooked. I also believe that it's including by black leaders. I think that people who are considered black leaders in the community sometimes are not overlooking, but they're not as involved to the day-to-day. Picking up on what Roz was talking about as far as the activism, the day-to-day activism, we have a tendency, especially in the movement, Black Liberation, BLM, Awakening, whatever you want to call it, we are in a point where we're talking about it, but we're talking about it in Des Moines, and we're talking about it in Davenport, and we're talking about it in Waterloo and Cedar Rapids, but we're not talking about it in Newton or Norwalk or Indianola or Johnston and Knoxville, and these are where I'm getting the calls from, and these are some places who have the biggest obstacle against them because they're literally fighting an entire town, just them.
Let me ask you all a question, and you all can answer this in 30 seconds or less. That'd be fantastic. Because a lot of the things that you all touched on, they connect. I guess with 2021 coming up, what is it specifically that you all are looking for from a candidate? Like, what does that look like as what does a non-black leader in our community look like as a politician right now?
What I'm looking for in a candidate right now in 2020 with the election is a leader. We haven't had a leader for nearly 4 years. And a leader knows what to do, how to do, when to do. And we, at this present time, we lack leadership. So I'm looking for a leader. And I feel that along with that, everything else will fall into place. We'll be considered as people of color. We'll have criminal justice reform. We will have the racial unrest will decrease. I mean, everything will fall into place. So I'm looking for a leader.
What kind of candidate are we talking about? Presidential, any office? In general, as a person, I think you have to have a heart for people, and literally have a heart for people. You have to be a servant. If that's the case, then you don't have to worry about whether you're leaving out this person or you're leaving out this group, or whether you're representing this group or you're representing this group, because you're representing the best for people. You're trying to serve them the best you can, and if you're trying to serve them, you're not worried about leading them. But if you serve them well enough, they'll follow you.
All right, Russ.
I'm going to shake the question a little bit, because I think that going forward, what leadership can mean for a state of Iowa is it can be black leadership. There can be somebody black who leads our state, right? We can lead by example. We can lead through life experiences because we know what it's like to be in impoverished communities, but we also know what it's like to have to survive in a world that wasn't meant for us, in a structure that wasn't designed for us to thrive. If we have that mindset, then we can do well for everybody. But we start at the bottom, right? We try to raise that up and raise the floor for everybody. So I think leadership can look like whatever the people ask it to look like. I don't think that has to be non-black. I think that can be black individuals leading our state.
Okay. Thank you for that, Ras. You are watching the Black America Forum. I hope y'all have enjoyed this panel. We'll be right back. Y'all keep watching, keep tuning in, keep learning. Thank you. Teresa Greenfield is running for U.S. Senate against Incumbent Joni Ernst. Now, I know you all have seen a lot of the attack ads and back and forth. That's not the vibe that we took today. We got directly to the questions, and she got directly to the solutions. I want you all to take a listen now. All right, and thank you for joining us. We are here right now with Teresa Greenfield, candidate for the Senate currently. Thank you for joining us.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invitation. I look forward to our conversation.
Thank you so much. So let's just get started. In general, can you break down what policies you would put into play here in Iowa, specifically regards to Black voters?
Fantastic. Well, I tell you what, it has been an honor to be running for the United States Senate, and I've done over probably about 325 campaign events around the state. Wow. And reaching out to everyone, including the Black community. Matter of fact, we just finished up an event out in Waterloo called Empower North End. Had a great crowd, had faith leaders, had young students from college, had a veteran who was a little on the older side but was fired up to be there. Because, you know, those issues are for all of us. But when it comes to really things that I think can help all of us, but particularly our Black community, investing in education. Let's talk about that. One of my big priorities is working hard to make sure that trade schools, technical schools, community colleges, debt-free. Debt-free. Now, I'm a product of progressive leaders that made that kind of investment. Governor Bob Ray, Republican, maybe 40 years ago or so, invested. And poor, scrappy farm kid, I went to Iowa Lakes Community College, and I finished that freshman year not one dime in debt. So it was easy to go because I knew I could afford it. I knew that I would come out with some skills, and it would get me on that path. I think when it comes to building wealth, providing for our families, education is where we start, making that investment in our students. But it's not just our students. I was also widowed at the age of 24, and I had to go back to school to get some skills to get on that path to feeding my family as a single mom. That kind of debt-free education is exactly what folks that need to start over sometimes need too. So investing in education so we can close that wealth gap and make sure everybody has some skills to get started to earn living wages and provide for their families and have a real shot at their, whatever their American dream is one place I would like to start.
Let's talk a little bit more just economically. What kind of other policies do you think are necessary aside from education and debt-free college in order for the Black community? We're talking, you mentioned that old veteran who was still rather fired up, or even young people too, but people who are 40s, 50s, who have never feel like they've never gotten a fair shake. They've never been able to do better and be better in this community. What economically can you do for them?
Well, I want to start by saying, first off, I recognize that Black and brown communities have faced discrimination for generations, and I think that generations of discrimination has built systems that have racism in them. And we have to attack all of those systems, whether it's policing or whether it's healthcare or whether it's education, where I just talked about a couple of things, whether it's lending, so housing. And so we have to look at every one of our systems. One that I benefited from was Social Security, you know, as a widowed young mom. That system worked great for me. I've really questioned whether it would have worked the same way for a 24-year-old Black woman who had a 13-month-old, who was expecting number 2, you know, coming to get that kind of help. I think it might have been a little harder. I would like to think it would have worked, but we know too often the stats are that things don't work. So where do we start economically? We talked about education and investing. I talked about debt-free community college. I think at the front end, universal pre-K also needs to be a place we start. We have to take a look at lending. So one of my plans was called Small Towns and Bigger Paychecks. Who doesn't want a bigger paycheck? We all want a bigger paycheck. But in it, I talk about minority businesses. And it is really clear that when Black leaders, business leaders, community members apply for loans, right here in Polk County where I live, they're denied those loans at twice the rate of anyone else. So we've got to address that kind of discrimination and grow opportunities to gain capital or get access to credit to grow small businesses. So again, you can get on that path. 1, follow your dream, be an entrepreneur, but 2, build wealth for your family. Then let's go to housing. Very similar kinds of situations where loans for housing are denied at a much higher rate. So we have to take a look at all of our communities and our housing and make sure that we've got loans available so people can begin to invest. And we know that buying home ownership, number 1 way to build wealth for your family.
If I could just follow up on that, how on a federal level do you do that? Of course, the idea of it is wonderful to allow people to have home ownership, but how do you get the federal government to, is that increasing the amount of loans available? Is that changing the way loans are, the way loan officers are looking at the people who are trying to get the loans? I mean, what specifically needs to be done in order to stop this process or help the process?
Yeah, help the process. Well, we're a big state of 99 counties. We're a rural state. And one of the things that I think we have to have is a rural undersecretary for rural development in the USDA. And it sounds like that's all just rural, but this person would be the advocate for rural states like ours and interfacing with HUD on housing, making sure that the loans are coming to all areas of our state, not just urban and not just rural, but that we're hitting our numbers. We need to set benchmarks also. One of the pieces of research that I am just delighted to have my hands on is One Economy. I love One Economy. But it's not just their 2017, 2018 report, it's their updated report where they took that data that they worked so hard to gather and they created benchmarks. Those are the benchmarks that we can then take federally or at the state level and try to hit, whether it's through housing and housing through the USDA, their HUD and our HUD programs, whether it's lending, whether it's education, graduation rates, healthcare issues too. I mean, they have benchmarks set forth, and those benchmarks really set a roadmap, I believe, a blueprint for policymakers like myself, and that should be a tool that every state should have, and we should have it for the whole state of Iowa, to guide us at the federal level also.
And just for anyone watching who's not familiar with the One Economy report, it's specifically a report on Polk County, and it is rather staggering, some of the numbers that have come out of that report for just the lack of resources that Black and brown people have gotten in Polk County specifically.
Yeah, the numbers, I encourage everybody to get out and read the One Economy report and the follow-up blueprint that sets the benchmark. So whether it is understanding unemployment rate amongst the Black community versus any other community, how much higher it is, whether you look at healthcare and fetal death rates, it is 30% higher in the Black community in Polk County than any other community. Unacceptable.
And we're gonna probably get into that
I'm sorry.
No, you're totally fine. I like the energy that you're coming with that. That's dope. Switching gears a little bit, this is one of the most tumultuous times in American history here recently. What, in terms of police reform, do you feel like needs to happen, or do you believe there needs to be police reform? If so, what does that look like to you?
Right. Well, one, I don't support defunding our police, but I do support reforms in all of our systems, and policing is one of them. I think that we've taken some great steps here in Iowa with passing the Plan for a More Perfect Union. It recognizes that we need to invest in ending discrimination, and we're going to do it by investing in racial bias training, de-escalation training, banning chokeholds, transparency, more accountability. I think those are really good first steps, but there's more that we can do, so much more. Let's start with banning the box. Let's make sure that if folks have served their time and they're coming back into our communities, we know, number one thing, getting a job is how everybody wants a job and to provide for their family. So banning that box, it's been done for federal contractors. Let's do it across this country. So there are so many things we can do. It starts, though, with recognizing that we do have systemic racism, and that our Black and brown communities have suffered from discrimination, and that we all play a responsible role in taking action.
And that, of course, also involves the incarceration rate in our country. 13% of the country, Black men. 40% of those who are incarcerated in our country, Black men. What do you think can specifically be done on a federal level to help to get away from that stark difference?
And right here in Iowa, if I could just tag on, 4% Black population, 21% of the incarceration rate. That's a problem. A number of things can be done. One, we have to take a look at the First Step Act, which was passed looking at sentencing, that's fantastic. We have to do things like decriminalize marijuana, which is something that has overburdened the Black community when it comes to those penalties. We have to take a look at that criminal justice system. I just spoke about banning the box. And then I really do believe we have to invest in mental health care and addiction care across the board. I think that our law enforcement systems have been taxed to really address things that they're not trained to do, and that our jails and our criminal justice system have become sort of that pipeline of care, when really we need mental health care and addiction care, and to make sure that folks are getting the care they need and can get back on their feet to providing for themselves and their family.
Yeah. Speaking of marijuana, I guess while we're on the subject, I guess, what do you think has taken Iowa so long to get over that hurdle? I mean, especially with our disparity rates and everything. What do you think that hump is in the state?
Well, I can't speak to that hump in this state. I can speak to me, and I know that I would like to decriminalize marijuana, absolutely. And I will tell you, as I crisscross the state, healthcare is the #1 topic I hear about, and marijuana, cannabis, and the benefits that folks all across the state have received. We need to advance that much further, both here at the state and I think at the federal level too. Yeah. When it comes to legalizing marijuana, well, I think that's a state issue, and I think the state of Iowa should take that up, and as an Iowan, I would vote for it.
Okay. So we're speaking of healthcare. Healthcare is another issue that's plaguing, especially not only America, but when you look at the numbers, especially for Black women specifically, it's a nightmare. What could we expect from you if elected to help us address those issues? Especially, and but with COVID, diabetes, high blood pressure, it's a number of issues afflicting the community, and access to proper health care is atrocious. So.
You're right on, and it is the #1 topic around the state.
It's huge.
It's huge. Everywhere I go, it's healthcare. I took the time to stop by the Focus on Diabetes event in Waterloo, which really was focused on the Black community, but it was open to everybody. So I got a diabetes screening too that day, and my flu shot. Everybody get your flu shot. And but you know, understanding the disproportionate amount of pre-existing conditions like diabetes and heart disease in the Black community, and how that leads to outcomes that are much worse when it comes to COVID and other illnesses. We have to address it. One of the things, though, I've been really concerned about is maternal mortality rates that have been going up in this state across the board, though, for all communities.
Give me some snaps on bringing that up.
Well, thank you, but it is shocking, though, in the Black community. Shocking. And we actually hosted a forum, and we had Black leaders, nurse practitioners, nurse midwives, and we had a OBGYN from the University of Iowa. All participated, along with community members from around the state. And I love forums, by the way. It allows people from all 99 counties to join in online. And there's a lot that we can do. One is continuing to educate and help people see that racism is real and what that looks like through examples. But when it specifically comes to women, there is this thing called the Black Momness Bill, which we need to pass, and I support. But it's really clear that for the Black community, the real critical time for health is after they leave the hospital and that entire first year. So we have to make sure our moms, one, don't lose their insurance during that first year, so they continue to get not only well baby checks, but the whole family gets checked. And that women are trusted and believed when they come to their healthcare providers with their concerns. And those concerns can be an ache and pain, but they also can be more than baby blues. They can be some of the struggles that they're having emotionally, adjusting, struggles in their homes, and making sure that they're getting that mental health care support also. I'm a mom of 4. I know it's hard. And so I want to make sure moms get the care they need. But we have to tackle this problem because it is shocking and unacceptable that in the Black community, that maternal mortality rate is so high.
New mom of twins who did go to the hospital with concerns that weren't anything, and they were so kind to me. And to be turned away when you were feeling vulnerable like that, I cannot imagine.
That's exactly right. And by the way, I'm a twin, so congratulations.
Thank you very
Twins
much.
rock. Can I just say that?
I agree. Twins do rock.
You bet.
Okay, so this October, we're tail end of October into, of course, the election November. Domestic Violence Awareness Month is October, and domestic violence plagues the Black community. What do you think can be done? Are there specific policies that should be targeted at Black Americans, or do you think that it's a domestic violence issue as a whole that needs to be fixed?
Well, it's both, but it's a domestic violence issue at whole. First thing we need to do in 2021 is reauthorize the Violence Against Women's Act. We need those resources to continue, and we need them in our state, and we need them for the whole state, and we need them for the Black community too. I've taken the time to meet with the Iowa Coalition Against Domestic Violence and just talk about the resources across the whole state and across the communities they serve. And certainly during COVID, it is clear that domestic violence has not decreased. It has increased. And so they need those resources to continue and be adequate. We've got to invest in mental health care across this state, making sure that if people are in crisis, that our jail system is not their source of care, but that there are alternate sources of care. One of the things I did was I visited with a group called Peer-to-Peer Respite in DeWitt, Iowa. It's the first of its kind, and they provide 7 days respite. And the respite can be to take a break from family and friends, whatever situation you're in. They often, though, really help people transition from maybe a hospital situation or inpatient care situation, where they're not quite ready to go home and be on their own, and they just need another 7 days to, just collect themselves, get a little more support, so they're ready to be back on their feet as they move on. But it's creative, it's entrepreneurial, it's a one of a kind. And I think when it comes to domestic violence, we need to be looking at those kinds of resources in all of our communities and help build them up.
Okay, thank you so much. So I guess our last thing is, in 90 seconds, give your exact pitch to why Black voters should choose you, especially over your candidate, over your person that you're running against.
Well, I got to tell you, I think Iowans are a bunch of independent thinkers, and they're a bunch of independent voters, and I want them to vote for me. So that's the pitch I'm going to make. I got in this race for all kinds of reasons. One, to put Iowans first, to put our hardworking families first. I came out of the farm poor, scrappy. My parents darn near lost it all in the farm crisis. I didn't have a dime to my name, and I benefited from an investment in college, community college, so it was debt-free. I know what it did to put me on the path of success. I want everybody to have that path to success, and the Black community too. Second, I've had tough times, and I've had to rely on a hand up. For me, it was Social Security, but I know people need a hand up throughout their lives, and I want to make sure that I'm protecting and sustaining that hand up, whether it's Social Security, whether it's Medicare, whether it's Medicaid, but it's also our public school systems. Investing in our people, in my opinion, is how we are going to improve our lives and make sure that all of our ships rise. And then on the farm, I'm just going to give you my farm story. My dad always said there's no boy jobs and there's no girl jobs. There's just jobs that need to get done. And I frankly look at solving problems the exact same way. I see we have a lot of jobs to get done. We've got to work together like we do in our hometowns and our communities to get those jobs done. We've got to end the divisiveness and the bickering and the name-calling in Washington. And I want to go represent, put Iowans first, and do just that. So would be honored to earn everyone's vote on November 3rd.
Dope. Super dope, man. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Teresa Greenfield, y'all. So make sure you all are getting out to vote. We're going to continue this programming. We'll be right back after this, the Black America Forum.
And you just heard from Teresa Greenfield, the candidate for U.S. Senate. And of course, there are so many things that are happening right now. The discussion is on a federal level, and that's what a lot of the buzz is about. But what we want to do with these community panels is talk about what's happening in our community and what can be done here locally, because that's what a lot of us have the power to do, and a lot of us have the power to change. October, which we're now on the tail end of, it was Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and courageous Luana, and Reverend Rob, I want to talk about domestic violence, because you all three work very closely with domestic violence victims, but you have passion for ending it. So Luana, I'll start with you. Talk to me a little bit about what you do and what you are doing in your community.
Sure. Thank you for asking. So we are the Iowa Coalition for Collective Change. I'm the executive director, and we're the Violent Crime Coalition for the state. So what we do is we certify culturally specific domestic violence, sexual assault programs, victim services programs, and we also certify homicide and violent crime programs in the state of Iowa. And what we're doing is we're listening. Right, because we work specifically with culturally specific communities, meaning marginalized communities, specifically in the Black community as well. We're listening to what survivors say that they want and what they say they need, and oftentimes it doesn't match with current services in the way they look now. So I know that the domestic violence field as a whole is trying to pivot to make services match what survivors say they need, but we've got a long way to go.
And courageous. You are one of those groups that is certified by Luana. How perfect. So talk to me about what you do and what services you provide and what you need in order to provide those services well.
Thank you. I appreciate the whole what you need to provide the services well piece. So thank you for that. Courageous Fire LLC is an agency specifically targeted to Black women and our experience with domestic violence. It is the #1 health issue that Black women face. And so because of the way that we see the world and the way that we relate to it, the systemic solutions don't work for Black women. We can't access the system for a number of reasons that I wish I had time to go into today. But for a number of reasons, we can't access that. And then the way that we learn best always involves art, culture, and group settings. And so Courageous Fire LLC has a program that is geared toward prevention of future predatory relationships based on those types of models. What we need is funding that does not have strings attached to it, that Black and culturally specific programs can't meet.
Because a lot of these funding, a lot of the funding that comes down from the state legislature, what are those strings and how does that put you in a box?
Okay, I can give you a specific example from 2020. Okay. So everybody's like, oh, they're throwing money at culturally specific programs. Courageous, your agency should be just able to get all kinds of money. So programs for us look like, you can have this money as long as you have $100,000 in revenue for the year. Our programs don't have that kind of revenue, so we're not going to get that funding. As long as you have this amount of employees, we always work with skeleton. So we're not going to usually meet the numbers for the amount of employees that you need to get the money. So we need stuff that just is there. If you have an agency and it's open and it's serving, can we have the money?
But isn't there a fear of abuse of those dollars if nobody's watching them? But that's what you're going to hear. I know, you give me those eyes, but that's what you're going to hear from the state legislature.
But when you have stuff that is proven, for instance, if you want proof that our program is being used and it is working, then go ahead and tell us that you want us to report that. We can report that, no problem. But we need the money.
In order to exist.
Thank you.
Reverend Rob. You are a pastor in a predominantly Black community. You were just at a vigil tonight for someone who was killed. You are a community leader. People come to you. People trust you. So what are you doing and what can you do and what do you need help doing in order to stop domestic violence?
Well, first of all, thank you, and thank you to the team for allowing us to be here today. And to these two beautiful Black women, I must make sure that we pay homage where it is due. And to my good friend MarKaus for the invite. Here's kind of where I stand. I believe a lot of things begins and ends with policy. I believe when we're able to change policy, then we're able to dictate how we can make sure that things are handled. I had a conversation, a young lady just came to me I was on the road. We've been on the road for the last 25 days traveling throughout the state of Iowa. A young lady called me and she said that she was assaulted for 90 minutes. And she was asking, what should she do? Who should she call? Because if she called the police, she felt like because it was a white male that assaulted her and it's a white male police officer, that her story may not be heard. Not only that, but I stopped for a moment in the busy days that we have to catch up with a friend who had just lost her infant child. We know that black women lose their babies 4 times greater than any other ethnicity group in this country. Now, a friend of mine just lost her baby. I stopped for a moment because she calls me, and I stopped for a moment to check on her, and come to find out she shared with me that she had also suffered at the hands of an abusive spouse, lover, or significant other. And so my job is to make sure that we direct them to programs. And another thing, my job is to make sure that people know that I'm not the end-all be-all, that I don't have all of the answers. We can pray about it, we can talk about it, but then we got to go get some mental health services. Then we got to go to people like Courageous to help them through the process. I can't help you through the process. I haven't lived that story. I don't know that story. I can only listen and then connect you with the ones who can help you through it.
So for people who are sitting at home and maybe they don't know that process either, they don't know what that's been like, but they want to do something because they hear these stories, they know it exists, and they want to see change. What can people do? What is your call to action?
So I always urge everybody who is watching, who is listening, and I get it, it's always an ask, but you have to give. If you say you care about Black lives, you have to give. If you say you care about progress and forward movement, changing policy, you have to give. Whether it's $1, $5, $20, or if you're a larger donor, $25,000 or $50,000, corporations get involved. This is how we change culture. We change culture when we start to focus our dollars where we say things actually matter.
All 3 of you, I want nothing more but to talk to you all night, and unfortunately we are out of time, so thank you so much for being here and for participating in this conversation and for everything you do every single day.
Thank you for having us.
You are watching the Black America Forum 2020. Our final guest for the evening is not a politician running for election in 2020, but rather a surrogate for Joe Biden's presidential campaign, Donna Brazile. She's the former interim chair of the DNC, and we asked her why, as a Black woman, she supports Joe Biden for president. Take a listen to our conversation.
Donna Brazile, thank you so much for joining us today at the Black America Forum 2020. Let's just get started by telling us why you decided to support Joe Biden for president.
Well, I've known Joe Biden for almost 30 years. He's a decent man, an honorable man, but he is a fighter for civil rights, equal justice under the law, a fight for environmental justice. When I started my career in politics, I worked for Jesse Jackson. Soon after that historic campaign, it was Joe Biden who came to me as a Southern girl and offered me an opportunity to work for him. While I turned him down in favor of Dick Gephardt, Joe and I have remained very close friends. We're both Catholic. I've known him for so long that I'm able to call him Joe, despite the fact that he's been the former vice president of the United States.
Donna, can you talk to us a little bit about your personal experiences, what you've seen in the Black communities, what you think needs to be done on an economic level, and then tying that into Joe Biden's presidential campaign, what you think Joe Biden can do to help alleviate some of these issues?
This pandemic, the coronavirus, has devastated the Black community. It's devastated the country. And I think the Biden-Harris campaign has made their #1 priority to mitigate the dramatic and deepening impact that the virus has had on our community, to ensure that essential workers get the supplies they need, to help Black businesses stand back up, and to help reduce the number of African Americans and others who are dying from this pandemic. That has been an important priority of the Biden-Harris platform, but it's something that I know the vice president personally is concerned about: the impact, the economic toll that this virus is having on the Black community, the health disparities that we now have to deal with. And let's not forget the digital divide, the fact that during this pandemic, many poor areas, rural areas, including urban centers and others, have suffered because of the lack of resources to provide for their families and, of course, their children during this digital divide. So Biden-Harris has a plan to address all of these issues, and it's not just on paper, it's in reality. They're going to work with governors and mayors across this country to get people back on their feet.
Thank you. So we're in the midst of a national civil rights movement. Have you had the opportunity to speak to Mr. Biden about his reaction to the protest and call for police reform? And if so, what is his response been to that?
From day one, and long before the murders of George Floyd and so many others across this country, Joe Biden understood that criminal justice reform had to be one of the most important issues. During the Obama-Biden era, we saw that they took on the challenges of 21st century policing. They took on the issues of sentencing disparities. And I believe that Joe Biden will be a key leader in this area. Of course, Kamala Harris, who's done so much on criminal justice issue, this is going to be an important conversation that we have: racial equity, systemic racism. Look, Joe Biden is not afraid to say Black Lives Matter. He's not afraid to talk about us coming together. He's not afraid for us dealing with some of these systemic problems that have disproportionately left people of color behind, not just in terms of the economy, but housing. Housing is a major issue that needs to be addressed. We need to have a comprehensive conversation about how we improve the life chances of Black people and poor people in this society, so that we're not looking at this huge gap, whether it's in terms of funding, equality, providing resources for Black businesses. This is part of Joe Biden's 6-point plan to get the country back on its feet, but most importantly, to target Black communities for additional help and resources.
In kind of line with that is, of course, healthcare in the Black communities. Do you see in communities where you travel to, that you have been in, the disproportionate impact of poor access to poor access to healthcare for Black Americans? And what do you and the Biden-Harris campaign believe needs to be done about that?
There's no question the health disparities are extremely important, that we correct this issue. Look, the number one concern for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris is to preserve the Affordable Care Act. This legislation, which is over 10 years old, has provided a lifeline to not just the communities of color, Black people, Hispanics, and others, but it has provided a lifeline to poor people, people losing their jobs. Imagine in a pandemic, you lose your job, you lose your health care, and you have no access to the kind of medication and the kind of course, treatments that you need during a global pandemic. The Republicans are saying, cut it off, cut it away, repeal it. The Democrats are saying, preserve it, strengthen it, and provide it to everyone. I want to tell you on a personal note, many people in my family, my niece, my aunt, my cousin, they've all been impacted by COVID. And while they have recovered, I have seen over the past few months that people are scared of this virus because many of them are not recovering. I have participated in so many virtual funerals to say goodbye to my loved ones, to say goodbye to my coworkers, to my family during this pandemic. We got to make sure that there's more testing, mobile testing sites, that we open up community healthcare centers so that people can get the treatment they need. And of course, when the vaccine is available, I believe that those who are impacted by this virus, our healthcare workers, our first responders, and also people of color and the poor must have access to those vaccines.
Thank you, Donna. Let's talk a little bit about getting the Black vote out in general. That's actually the reason we started this. I started this forum in general, was to try to get the people that come to my shows or people that are drinking my whiskey to actually go vote and participate in other things. What has the Biden campaign done to kind of drive up the Black vote, or what things need to be done to increase Black voter participation?
I think when the history is told of the 2020 presidential campaign, you will read that it was not just Black voters, but young voters who came out in record numbers that changed the trajectory of history and decided to move the country forward. I mean, I think there's a stark choice in this election between a candidate who believes he knew it all, who could do it all by himself, a candidate who just recently attacked doctors. I mean, a doctor? You're going to attack a doctor? Versus a candidate who will listen to science, a candidate who believes in the value and the worth of every human being. That's Joe Biden. And of course, that ticket, the Biden-Harris ticket, is the ticket to go. Here's what I say to my friends, including my young nieces and nephews. I mean, think about the bridge. Think about what John Lewis did. Think about what that generation of freedom fighters did to cross that bridge. They risked their lives. And now you must risk your life in order to vote. Yes, you are risking your life when you go out there in the middle of a pandemic. You are risking your life so that you can have a better future. So I tell people that this campaign has made a historic investment in Black mobilization, Black turnout, but also the fact that this campaign has Black leadership from the top down. I remember when I was in Al Gore's campaign, and yes, we had a sprinkling. It was like more salt and pepper. This is a campaign that is seasoned from the top to the bottom, or from the bottom up, with young people, Black people, gay people. This is a campaign that recognizes that everyone needs to have a seat at the table. And guess what? You don't have to bring in a folding chair because there's enough seats for everyone. That's why this campaign is mobilizing people. Your votes matter. 80,000 people decided not to turn out in 2016, and look what happened. You now have the worst economy since the Great Depression. You have a virus that has infected over 9 million Americans and taken the lives over 220,000 Americans. Are you willing to be one of those Americans that will go without jobs, go without a health care, go without a lifeline to the future? Are you willing to be evicted? No, go out and vote. That is what Joe Biden is urging you to do. And I know that Joe Biden will respect you. I want to just say this, MarKaus, on a personal note. You know, when my dad, who was a decorated war hero, when he was in the final months of his life, my dad was a card-carrying Catholic. He had his rosary beads on him practically every day of his life. Joe Biden reached out, so did Barack Obama. And they wanted my dad to know how proud they were of his service. When Joe Biden finished the call to my dad looked at me and my older sister and he said, "Let's do the rosaries." That's Joe Biden. He's a man of his word. He's a man of faith, but most importantly, he's a decent and honorable man. I can't tell you the times that Joe Biden has called me so many times and say, "Come on over." And I go over to his house. And, I wanted some grits and some eggs and some bacon. And Joe was sitting there eating, his oatmeal with some berries. I say, "Okay, I'll eat what you're eating right now, okay?" But he just wanted my input. I mean, he was vice president of the United States. He never forgot me. He never forgot my sacrifice. He never forgot my family. And so I want to say to your family, the families of others in this great important state, Joe Biden will not forget you. He will not forget your family. He will not forget your sacrifice or your struggle. And on the end of that day, when you cross that bridge, Joe Biden will be with you to go the next step in this long journey towards civil rights and equal justice under the law for all Americans.
Wow, Donna, thank you so much. So I can't put in words how thankful we are that you were able to come through and participate in this today. Everyone watching, that's the energy. That's the energy all 2020. So everyone, stay tuned. We'll be right back. This is the Black America Forum. Donna Brazil, thank you so much for coming through today.
When I come back and go to West Des Moines Shopping Center, when I come back and have some of that delicious food, I hope you and I can talk politics, talk public policy, because stay in touch. This is the future and you represent the future. And I want to say how very proud I am that you're doing this, because by educating, you inspire, and by reaching out, you expand. So God bless you. And thank you for your hard work.
Yo, God bless you. I owe you some whiskey. You're about to make me crown my first broadcast. Thank you so much.
I'm a wine drinker. You can drink your whiskey. I got wine because that was Jesus' first miracle. He listened to his mother and got the party started.
All right now.
Thank
all
you
right.
very much, Donna.
Thank you all. God
Thank
bless
you.
you. See you
God
soon.
bless.
Bye-bye.
We are so thankful for you joining us today at the Black America Forum 2020. We hope that you appreciated everything you saw today. Even if you didn't, I want to make sure that you know the importance of going out to vote.
Again, we don't care who you vote for. We just care that you vote. The only way this process works for any of us is if it works for all of us. For more information on how to vote, go to voterready.iowa.gov. I'm Sabrina Ahmed.
I'm MarKaus. Be safe, be strong, be cool. Vote.